What to do, folks? This is Acid Root. So I'm going to review the debut EP by Bone Thugs and Harmony, and this project was called Creepin on a Come Up. This came out in the summer of 1994, and in some cases, this was kind of the next checkpoint for fans of Eazy-e also, because Eazy-e basically discovered Bone Thugs and put them on. This is kind of an amalgamation of like a very small true taste of Bone Thugs when they were on Ruthless Records on Eazy-E's label and affiliated with him towards the end of Eazy-E's life. Particularly interesting project. I really feel like Bone Thugs and Eazy-E mesh extremely well, and with the brief amount of songs that they did with DJ Unique and that type of stuff, I would have to say it was just very interesting, and this is a true like sweet spot and like stylish niche that needed a lot more exposure. It's just really too bad. Like if you didn't know, on Bone Thugs and Harmony's East 99 Eternal from 1995, originally Eazy-E was supposed to be on the song Mr. Bill Collector, but something happened, there was some mishaps and it got deleted and they just scrapped him from being on there. But there was originally more stuff with them, but this is kind of an amalgamation. Basically, Bone Thugs on this 1994 EP has like the same kind of G-funk sound that was starting to be popularized in the early mid 90s and such. They're from Cleveland, Ohio, so that's definitely kind of the concept here, but it's just interesting to kind of get G-funk throughout things that are not just West Coast. It kind of proved that G-funk doesn't just have to be a West Coast thing, and this is kind of like a type style that I really wish would have gotten fleshed out a lot more. It's just kind of a truncated project just because at least the ideas that they had on their original projects with Ruthless Records, East 99 Eternal, and this project Creeping on a Come Up, I mean, Bone Thugs went through some changes. They had a number of different things that they tried throughout the late 90s and 2000s and beyond. But this is definitely something that these first two projects, the 94 and 95 projects that they did, are typically seen as like classics. And that's definitely kind of seen to be said as that. I mean, this is going to get a pretty high scores. I'm not going to give it a 10 out of 10, but I will have to say it gets a pretty rave scores. This is some quality stuff here. It just really has like a unique style towards it in a lot of ways. So to talk about the singles, there were two of them off an EP. This is kind of a pretty stylish thing that there were two singles off this EP. And basically, the first single was Thuggish Ruggish Bone. This has a really emphatic hook. The chick that does the hook on this song does an exuberant job with it. And this is Bone Thugs' first charting song. It's kind of established them pretty much from the get-go. First hit, first hit out the gate, they had something. And this one really reminds me of like a day kind of commute type hit. It's definitely a thuggish type song, but this is kind of like that sleazy kind of West Coast ghetto kind of California type vibe about it. Just kind of in like the pitch of like 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, something like that. It just really, I mean, I don't see this as like a nightclub or night venue type single, something like that, but it definitely strikes me as just like the standard summery California and Midwest kind of hazy kind of vibes of just like the early and mid 90s and stuff. It just definitely has that pitch. It just really feels like, I mean, it really feels like Bone Thugs were from California, the way that they were cranking out some of these G-funk type tunes, and it definitely has that. I really see it as like a mid-afternoon kind of early evening type hit, just for like the malaise of if you have a job, or just the standard stuff that you're up to, daytime schematics, that type of stuff, and that sort of pitch. Just an overall easy highlight, and probably one of the best songs on the project. The second single is For the Love of Money, and this has Eazy-E on there, the executive producer and NWA member Eazy-E on here, and this is definitely a kick-ass song. This is probably, in my opinion, the best song on here, but it just has the most overt kind of energy. Eazy-E definitely needed to have more of like his hands-on approach with more of this album. I mean, he's only on this song and then a little bit of the intro, which is kind of in like a demonic voice. But I just would kind of have to say, I mean, at least Eazy-E should have done like a chorus or something else. But for what it is, this is a nice pitch of like the 4 or 5 original. I don't know if all 5 Bone Thugs are on this song, but at least 4 Bone Thugs plus Eazy-E are on this song. And it's just a really emphatic, kind of perfect pitch for the 90s. This just felt like a song that set off the pace for at least the early and mid 90s kind of gangster rap type vibe. This is the sort of stuff that once again feels like it was cranked out of California. The stuff like Tupac's California Love and Dr. Dre's Let Me Ride and some of that type stuff. Just easy kind of going hit. It's interesting that Bone Thugs did not join in on Eazy-E's beef with Dr. Dre because that was still kind of fresh around this time. But there are no disses towards Snoop Dogg or Dr. Dre or Death Row yet for the most part. That just kind of happens to be the pitch. Is just as far as trying to say that this is just the G-funk type sound, and this is actually some stuff that just has some good pitches towards it, and this is an overall West Coast, even though it's Cleveland rap, it's an overall West Coast kind of highlight, and it just works as like a nightclub song too. This is a song I could see being played in the club. This has a really emphatic chorus. There's another chick on here that really knocks out the chorus. I want to say it's Jewel from Death Row, which is kind of odd that she was on this song considering that Ruthless Records and Death Row were kind of beefing. But yeah, just to kind of say, two chicks do some outstanding jobs on these hooks, and these are both really hooky, really emphatic singles. Both of, I mean, these two songs are reason enough to purchase this "Creepin' on a Come Up" EP. Eazy-E does a brilliant job. He says "motherfucker" at the end of this song and really has like an emphatic, kind of infectious vibe about it. It's just an overall kind of hooky kind of song and just overall highlight. So that just kind of happens to be the concept there. But to talk about the rest of this project, there are 8 songs on here. And out of 8, I recommend 5 to you. So those 5 songs would be Thuggish Ruggish Bone, For the Love of Money, Creepin' on a Come Up, the title track, No Surrender, and the intro. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about the intro. The intro is really like the intro has eazy-e on there. It's kind of in a more demonic voice, so you can't really immediately tell it's him, but he is on the song and says a lot of the kickoff point, introducing the Bone Thugs and that type of stuff. I really like this as like a creepy kind of real haunting piano type beat in there with like Bone Thugs kind of doing like their harmonized vocals, and it just really makes off for like a nice horrorcore and haunting kind of song. And this is interesting. This is definitely one I would listen to in the fall. This is just the kind of stuff that maybe Eazy-E knew of Esham and people like that who were kind of doing horrorcore back in 92, 93 and stuff. But it's just interesting that Bone Thugs, even though they don't do a song for horrorcore on here where they rap on it, there is at least this intro that kind of has that kind of haunting vibe. And I definitely would have liked for Eazy-E and Bone Thugs to have done a song with some horrorcore like the way it is on this intro. Definite highlight. No Surrender is kind of similar to Thuggish Ruggish Bone. No Surrender is kind of similar to Thuggish Ruggish Bone. Just a little bit more evening induced, where if Thuggish Ruggish Bone is about 3:30, 4 o'clock p.m., something like that, I feel like No Surrender is more of like 5:36, just early evening, that type of stuff, getting ready to be a night, but not quite in the pitch of the night just yet. But I definitely see it as like a traverse through the city, just kind of weaving in and out of the city, picking up beer, picking up lottery tickets, picking up stuff like that, clothes, food, that type of stuff, just general kind of errands. This Bone Thugs song just works as kind of like an errand running type song. It doesn't have to be taken to the extreme of like the thuggish pitch that it typically has and what they're saying in the lyrics, but this kind of works as like a city traverse kind of song. Creeping on a Come Up, the Creeping on a Come Up, the title track. This one really feels like a kind of woozy. I just really Creeping on a Come Up, the title track is another highlight. This one really has like a woozy kind of hungover type beat. It really just feels like more of like morning commute, just the sort of stuff, or maybe it's 9:30, 10:30 in the morning. It's basically kind of a hustle and got to get some money kind of song where that they're just kind of plotting on ways to kind of get forth and get a bag and that type stuff. And it's just interesting kind of get that. Definitely kind of like this is a pretty peppy song. I do definitely like the pep towards it. It's not necessarily sunshiny pep. This is about the most kind of rosy that Bone Thugs really gets on this project. I feel like Thuggish Ruggish Bone had like that kind of G-funk sleaze, but this one at least has like a decent amount of pep, but is this really taken in kind of like a distorted, kind of slurred out, kind of slizzard, and kind of hungover kind of vibe about it. I just really like that kind of pitch from what I saw in this song. And I would say that that would about take care of the 5 songs I recommend. To talk about the 3 songs I don't recommend, I didn't really like Mr. Ouija. I really feel like this should have had a beat on there. It was just a bunch of chanting and recitals that may have been interesting depending upon what happens, but it really needed an instrumental on the song. It just was a little bit too, like, I mean, they were trying to aim for more ghoulish and kind of haunting kind of vibes. I do like the kind of early horrorcore pitch on the first couple songs, but I really needed like a beat on there. I just think that's like the main thing about it. Down for My Thing was kind of like a real grimy and greasy kind of G-funk type song like Thuggish Ruggish Bone, but it didn't quite have as interesting a beat. and it really, I was trying to figure out the pitches to where to listen to it. This one's just kind of like a kind of this standard chill and hang out type song, but it just didn't come off. It was probably one of the least compelling songs on here. I feel like the concept of just kind of a lazy, kind of not doing much kind of song, Bone Thugs didn't really have nailed quite as well. But and I didn't like Mo Cheese because that's just an extension of the For the Love of Money beat, which is just kind of extra backdrops and finalized kind of pitches towards that song. So that wasn't much of anything other than just an instrumental. But that's just kind of the concept. So me liking 5 songs out of 8 on this EP, I would just have to say, for the most part, I'm gonna go ahead and give this album like a 7.75 out of 10. I feel like that's good enough just to be able to say it's over half the project. I basically like 4 out of 5 of the original songs, plus one extra additional intro and stuff. I kind of feel like some of these other ones, didn't hold up. It's just kind of, I mean, I know it's an EP, but I feel like it's kind of short winded. I definitely feel like there needed to be at least another song on here that really had some might. And, when you don't, when there's only 5 songs and there's 1 or 2 that you don't like, it really detracts from the score. And I feel like this is a pretty stellar debut. But it's not quite an assured classic. It's close, but I just feel like 2 hit singles and at least 2 extra cuts on here. But I think it just needed at least 1 extra song to kind of push it over the edge and make it a full blown above, just form of excellence in a lot of ways. But 7.75 is good enough. And the social score, I will go ahead and give like an 8 social, because the Eazy-e song is a real highlight. It's a nice club song. Thuggish Ruggish Bones, a nice early evening, late day commute, this kind of song. And Creepin' on a Come Up's a nice hustle song. No Surrender has a nice vocoder hook on there. That's a nice one. That's just kind of like city traverse and stuff. And the intro is really brilliant. Makes you wish that Eazy-E and Bone Thugs would have done some horrorcore. But 8 social, definite good vibes for that. In terms of the future, Bone Thugs, I'm not really sure what's been up with them. It's been a while since I've heard hide nor hair of them for the most part. They did drop records in at least the mid 2010s, but it's been quite a while since I've really seen them in action as far as knowing what they've been up to. But this is a definite highlight, and it just as an extra pitch of having Eazy-E kind of lightly affiliated with this project just makes you want way more from this particular pair up of them. It's just an overall brilliant kind of chemistry and concoction that they cross paths.